Hello everyone, and welcome to the second of 4 live webinars for Enterprise Cybersecurity Fundamentals, a short course presented by IT Masters on behalf of Charles Sturt University. My name is Guy Coward and I'll be your MC tonight. Your mentor is again Matt Constable, and I'll throw to him shortly. But as always, before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping, particularly about Zoom functions. We hope you are enjoying the ability to chat with panelists and amongst yourselves during the webinars. And as per last week, we ask that you direct questions directly related to the course material or to what Matt's talking about in tonight's webinar to the Q&A section, and direct your administrative questions to the chat function where Diane will be helping. So thanks for that tonight, Diane. Also, for those of you who haven't seen the course page yet, the materials are all up. That's been very organised. It's been wonderful, and the forums are going gangbusters. There's dozens of threads in the module 1 discussion forum. So make sure you have a look at all of the other threads and see what everyone else is saying, and just sort of augment your understanding. It's really, I think, one of the best parts of the short courses. Anyway, not much for me tonight. That's about it. Can you please all welcome your mentor, Matt Constable?
Thank you very much, Guy, as ever, for the fantastic introduction, and welcome everybody to our second week of this short course on Enterprise Cyber Security Fundamentals. First of all, I want to acknowledge just the good work that everyone's been putting in on the forum posts. There is a lot. And I'm slowly getting through, putting some comments on some things, trying to generate some extra discussion and some extra thoughts. But fantastic what you're doing there. It's good that you're engaging not only with the course content, but with each other. Obviously, the more you do that, the more you'll get out of these, any course, but certainly these short courses, which only run for a short period of time. So this evening, if we just skip past that first page, we're going to be having a looking at attacks, different types of attacks and different threat categories, okay? So I think the important thing to think about is think about what we talk about tonight and link it back to what we were talking about last week initially. So think about, as I said, I remember at the end of last session, I spoke about linking everything I talk about to the concepts of CIA and the CIA triad, so confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Also think about how these particular threats or attacks are assisted or enabled because of the different weaknesses that we talked about last week. So the different categories of weaknesses, so the technology weaknesses, configuration weaknesses, policy weaknesses, and human weaknesses. And you'll see as we go through that some of these attacks, they overlap some of those weakness categories, and some of them are completely in a category all on their own. We're not going to go into any real depth with any particular attacks and do attack demonstrations or anything like that, but we will talk about the generalized categories and some of the ways, and hopefully generate some discussion from you guys both this evening in terms of questions, but also in the forums during the next week, talking about how these attacks have affected your environment, if they have, at different times, and the sorts of things that you did to get around them and to mitigate against them. So, different attack types that we're going to have a look at this evening. So we've got network attacks, password attacks, application attacks, and human attacks, which are, broadly speaking, social engineering. Now, as I said last week with respect to the technology, the different weaknesses that we spoke about, these are one way to categorize attack types, okay? There are others. There are other different ways that you can categorize them. These are the ones that we're going to go through and have a look at specifically this evening. So, one of the really important things we need to know for a start is, where do these attacks come from? Okay. Often we think about attacks as being externally perpetrated. So coming from outside our network, either from some sort of partner network or mainly the internet. That's a big common one that we all think of, is that these attacks are going to be perpetuated from the internet. But the IBM Security Intelligence Survey of 2015 shows that that's not actually the case. The vast majority of attacks are perpetuated from the inside of your network. And a lot of that is to do with the elevated level of trust and access that people inside your network have to your particular environment. Now, in this particular survey, and I'm not saying it's that survey, we've actually got that survey, I believe, is up on the portal for you to have a read through. This survey is within a certain context and a certain area and looked at certain types of businesses, and so it's not 100% definitive, okay, but it's large enough. There's enough data within that particular survey to give us a good idea of what to be able to apply it generally. But we must always look at these things with a critical eye and say, okay, is that reasonable? Okay, so I'll let you read through the particular intelligence survey and we'll generate some discussion about that. But if we keep to the percentage at the moment, sorry, I took that little bit of a tangent because I thought it worthwhile mentioning, because I'll often get, someone will come up and say, what's the, how useful is this survey, or how realistic is this survey? Excuse me. So keep that in mind, that it's not perfect. So insiders 60%, outsiders 40%. So outsiders, what does that mean? So it means attacks from outside your internal network. So that can be from the internet, it can be from extranet partners, it could be from customers, it could even be from computers that you provide for people to walk in off the street and use. Okay, so think of it as attacks on your perimeter, whatever that perimeter may be. Okay, and as we spoke about last week, the perimeter is very fluid. It moves, it changes, it can be all over the place. So even if you think of it from that point of view as well, it is possible that you say, for example, you may have if you work for a financial organization, you may have a treasury department that's involved with payments and receipts. Okay, so that may have a hard security perimeter around that particular department. So if that's the case, then the outsiders are also anyone that's outside that treasury, but it could be in other internal departments. So you may argue that they are outsiders because they're outside of perimeter. You may also argue that they're insiders. Okay, I think the key to really think about is the insiders are categorized as people who have an elevated privilege or elevated access to something, or elevated trust, elevated level of trust. So if we're talking about the Treasury Department with that hard layer around the outsiders attacking that, you would think that you would say from that they are genuine outsiders because they don't have that elevated level of trust or access within that particular department. So it's a little bit of a thing that you need to get your head around. Okay, so when we were talking last week about the perimeter being very fluid, and you may have multiple perimeters, multiple level of perimeters, multiple layers, then the same applies to defining who is inside attacker and who is an outside attacker as well. So just little things to get your head around. So that's the outsiders. Well, the insiders, they found in their survey 15.5%, not sure I think they can be more accurate, were through inadvertent actions, inadvertent actors or inadvertent actions. So accidents, okay, things that weren't meant to occur but did occur. And then 44.5% were malicious insiders. Okay, so deliberate attacks or deliberate attempts to disrupt or defeat or upset or steal or whatever the case may be, and affect one of those impacts of one of those triad parameters, so confidentiality, integrity, or availability. Okay, so deliberate, not deliberate. But still 60% against insiders, which is a huge amount. So this is a really big selling point for you to take back to management and say, this is why we need defense in depth. This is why we need multiple layers of security, because the majority of security attacks are perpetuated from the inside. So we need to provide protective policy, protective mechanisms, technology, protective applications that try to limit the damage as much as we can from the inside, because that's where most of the problem is going to occur. The other thing you might argue is that an attack may start from the outside, but then once they gain access to the inside, they may launch additional attacks or other attacks. So you may reasonably say that those attacks have therefore been perpetrated from the inside. They can't be perpetrated from the outside, but once you get in past that hard, crusty layer, then they can be perpetuated. Okay, so you may argue that as well. So you can see it's a real mess. There's lots of different ways in which you can debate, discuss, talk about this, use it to sell your security solutions, use it to upgrade your security systems, using it as a selling point for management. Okay, there's lots of different ways you can discuss this and debate it. And I'd love for you guys to generate some discussion about this on the forums, because I think it's really, really interesting and really, really worthwhile digging down a bit. Okay, so network attacks in Q1 2016. So a little while ago, but we're going to have a look at a report in a minute, or at a resource in a minute, that gives us a little bit of a better view of what's been going on in 2017. So Q1 2016, the top types of network-based attacks, browser-based was the highest. I'll just turn my highlighter on. I always forget to do that. So browser-based, 36%, brute force, 19%, denial of service, 16%, attacks against SSL-based products, 11%, and then the rest sort of fall away. So browser-based, reasonably obvious, I guess, given that that's certainly the most common way for us to access resources external to our organization. And every computer on the planet comes with a, well, I shouldn't say every computer on the planet, the vast majority of computerized systems on the planet come with an embedded browser. So it's pretty hard to get away from it. All right. So different types of network attacks, different categories, or different, not categories, subcategories, or different specific attacks. So all of these, some of these were mentioned on the previous slide. All of these I've seen or done, not necessarily in a malicious way, but in terms of vulnerability and penetration testing at some stage. None of them are particularly difficult to get up and running off the ground, with freely available resource kits available to anyone on the internet. And I think that's something that we really need to keep in mind. And I'm sure all of you already know this, or I hope you would, but certainly something to keep in mind is that the vast majority of network-based attacks use really, really simple tools that anyone can run without any real need for an understanding of the underlying technology or underlying protocols, okay? It's really, really easy to get some of this stuff going. So in terms of the more popular ones that we saw from the previous slide, we've got our denial of service and distributed denial of service. So if we just have a look at these, I want to ask you some questions. So eavesdropping and sniffing. So what's that about? Okay, so that is looking at or trying to insert yourself into a communication stream to see what's going on, okay, to see who's communicating backwards and forwards and what they're communicating. So which one of the CIA triads is that impacting? So is it confidentiality? Could it be confidentiality? Could it be integrity? Could it be availability? Okay, so have a think about what do you think it is. We talk about the next one. So data modification, again, I think that's pretty easy one, isn't it? That's really getting towards the heart of integrity. That's mainly integrity. So eavesdropping and sniffing, you could say it's confidentiality. Yes, it ticks that box a little bit. Ticks the integrity box, perhaps, if there's some sort of changing happening. Data modification is definitely integrity. Spoofing. What about spoofing? That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because spoofing is basically purporting to be someone that you're not, or something that you're not, which can then lead to confidentiality breakdown, potentially integrity breakdown. Okay, denial of service and distributed denial of service. Again, they're pretty obvious ones. The main theme within those particular attacks is to create some sort of availability issue so that someone who has someone cannot access the resources that they should be able to access. Man in the middle. So MITM is man in the middle. And we have a look at it. The next slide's got a bit more information about that. So I might leave that one till then. Compromised key. Okay. DNS poisoning. DNS poisoning, that's an integrity thing. Also could be an availability thing. Reconnaissance, what are we looking for there? We're looking for information that is going to allow us to subsequently attack a target. Okay, so that's getting into that vulnerability scanning type area. Okay, doing reconnaissance. Not doing anything nasty, but just passively looking for information to try and build up an attack profile so that we can go and subsequently attack on a target and weasel our way in through the front door, so to speak, to elevate our privileges and then launch other attacks for information, to steal things, to damage data, whatever the main focus of our attack is. And then ARP, Address Resolution Protocol. So just a quick primer on that for those who don't know. So ARP, or Address Resolution Protocol, is a protocol that, if you think about, I'll take it a step further first. If you think about IP addresses and DNS, okay, so IP addresses are what computerized systems use as their address. DNS maps, if you like, or translates between those hard to remember IP addresses that most of us find difficult to remember and an easy to remember DNS name. Okay, so we remember words and symbols better than what we do dotted decimal notation for IP addresses. So if we take that down another layer, ARP does that translation from IP addresses to MAC addresses, so those physical burned in addresses on your network interface cards. Now, if you can attack ARP and attack the ARP table on a router or a switch or on a laptop, you can fool it into thinking that you're someone else, or that who they're talking to is a valid host and someone that's trusted. So they'll continue to send you information. You can also go the other way and you can poison ARP so that you can basically flood up all the resources in the ARP tables, or the memory area in routers and switches that keep these this ARP information. And so they can't hold any more, and then they start broadcasting and traffic starts going a bit crazy, and then you get into that availability realm. Okay, so that's really what an ARP attack is more about availability, although, as I've said, these things overlap. So an ARP attack, even just changing ARP addresses within an ARP table so that a host that you're communicating with thinks you're someone else and therefore gives you information that they shouldn't, that's impacting on confidentiality or potentially integrity as well. Okay, so it can, most of these attacks can impact on one or the other. Okay, sometimes multiple parts of the CIA triangle. So it's a really interesting process to sit down anytime you think of a different attack, or anytime you see a report in a paper or an article about some sort of security attack that's occurred or a problem that's occurred. Try to apply it to the CIA triad. And it's amazing how much understanding you'll start to build up about these different attacks. Once you start understanding what they're attacking, it's much easier to get to understand why they're attacking and the way they're attacking. So it's an interesting thought process to go through, and very simple because you've only got those three vectors: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And I know I talk about it a lot, but they really are critical in everything you do. A bit like the OSI model that I used to think was useless, and I use every day now. All right, so this particular slide is a little bit of the man in the middle. This is a bit more of a discussion about man in the middle than some of the other, rather than some of the other attacks. So the basic concept is that we have a sender and we have a recipient. And in the middle, we have an adversary or an adversary. And the sender and recipient are talking to each other. Now, the message in this case is only going one way, but of course it's bidirectional. You can think of it being bidirectional. So what can the adversary do? Well, they can interrupt the particular communication, which impacts on availability. They can eavesdrop, so they can listen in passively without either the sender or the recipient knowing that they're there. And in that case, that's mainly impacting on the confidentiality. They can masquerade, so using a vector like an ARP attack, for example, to pretend that they're the recipient, and they can get access to the information directly from the sender. Okay, so in this case, the poor old recipient doesn't get anything, but do they necessarily know that they're missing out on something? No, they may not, because the connection may never have gotten as far as them in the first place. If there's an interruption to the connection, they may notice something. But if there's no interruption, if the ARP attack or the adversary has successfully masqueraded as them before the communication's begun, then they may not even know that they're missing it. And the sender certainly doesn't, because they're convinced that the adversary is the person they think they are, they think they're communicating with. So they can masquerade, and therefore confidentiality, maybe integrity if you combine it with the next one, next two, fabrication or modification. But certainly in terms of the recipient, it's also that availability of information. They don't necessarily know that they haven't got it, but does that matter? No, of course it doesn't. They still haven't got access to the data that they should have to, and therefore it's also an attack against the availability. So fabrication can be done, if it's done in conjunction with masquerading, so at the same time, we end up with basically this modification. Okay, that's this modification attack. So that's changing things. So again, that's impacting confidentiality, integrity, and potentially availability. If, however, we masquerade and we take that information, and then at a later time, once we've disconnected from the sender, we then connect to the recipient using the same processes as we did to connect to the sender, and then either fabricate or change that information, then that's a separate attack again. So masquerading and fabrication can be combined into one, which basically becomes a modification attack, or they can be done separately. And of course, if we think about eavesdropping, masquerading, fabrication, and modification, they are all steps leading to the same point. They're all parts of the process. Okay, interruption is a little bit different because it can just be stopped, done, gone. But eavesdropping can be needs to be part of masquerading, because you need to know, even as an attacker, you need to know what it is that you're looking for first. Masquerading is before fabrication, so precedes fabrication. Even if you do them concurrently, you still have to masquerade and pretend to someone to get the information to then fabricate or change it and send it on to the recipient. So you can see it's reasonably straightforward when you look at it as a diagram, but it can be quite complex and quite difficult to detect, quite difficult to stop in some cases, depending on, you've got to link it back to those technology, configuration, policy, and human weaknesses that we talked about last week. Okay, depending on what combination of weaknesses and what level of weaknesses you have, this can be really easy to be attacked this way, or you can be quite resilient against it. Either way, it's very difficult to pick up. Okay, so that's network attacks. Password attacks, some password attacks. Okay, we're not going to go through the whole litany of password attacks because there are many, 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 many. But brute force, dictionary, and keylogger are three of the more common ones. So brute force is really just using some sort of system, a script, or a software system, or some other device to basically throw lots and lots of combinations of passwords at a particular device until you crack it, until you get the right password. And that's really, in a nutshell, what brute force is all about, throwing all the resources at it as hard as you can until you get the right answer. Now, an obvious way to help mitigate against brute force attacks is actually really simple. And that's just to enable password complexity. So you have to have, a capital, you have to have small lowercase letters, you have to have special symbols, you have to have numbers, potentially non-printable characters as well in some systems. Length of password is also important as well. So the longer you make a password, obviously the harder it is to crack, the longer it's going to take. Well, not necessarily the harder it is to crack, but the longer it can potentially take. Okay, the whole thing about any of these attacks, no matter what you look at it, is it's all going to come down to, we talk about risk, okay, and security all the time, where, there's a potential for something to happen, we have a vulnerability, there's a potential or risk of that vulnerability being exploited. We have to decide whether the cost of protecting against that vulnerability is worth it. So is the cost of protecting against that vulnerability less expensive than what's going to happen if that vulnerability is exploited? So what's the cost compared to, what's going to happen? Is the world going to stop? Is our business going to be destroyed? Are people going to die if our system is compromised? If the answer is no, it's not really much of an impact, then you might say, well, okay, we'll just leave that vulnerability there. It might be a 1 in a million chance it's going to be exploited. And even if it is exploited, it doesn't create too much of an issue, so we're not going to worry about it. Okay? Risk versus reward. The exact same principle applies to all these attacks. Doesn't matter what attack an attacker is going to set off, if they don't get what they want from it within the time frame that they want it, then they won't do it. They will look for another avenue in. They'll look for a different attack. It's all about trying to take the path of least resistance, not the path of most resistance, unless of course you're in a hacking competition or writing a PhD on something. And that's, plenty of people do that. But as a general rule, if you're a thief or a criminal, you want to try and get in as quick as you can. Get in as quick as you can, get the information or end result that you want, and then get out without anyone knowing that you've been there. That's the ultimate goal. So brute force from that perspective may not be an attack that you might initiate if you're looking to get into something quickly, because you might not, unless someone's left their password as password or admin or blank, which again, we refer back to the F-35 stealth fighter story from last week. That's basically what happened there. They left the passwords at defaults. Okay, so in that case, it was really, really simple to get in. The attackers used brute force to get in. I think they used brute force, it might have been dictionary, but anyway, they used a relatively simple attack to get in, when in effect they could have actually used an even simpler one. So then a dictionary attack, what's a dictionary attack? Dictionary attack is just using a file full of words or commonly used phrases or rearrangements of commonly used words or phrases. So it's basically like using a dictionary and going through word by word until you find a password. Now, obviously this is going to work in a lot of cases because people forget passwords. So they like to make them easy to remember by using commonly used phrases or pet names or birth dates or really, really simple things like that, because that's something that they've committed to memory and they won't forget it. The other thing people tend to do is they use the same password on all their systems, which of course is relevant if you have single sign-on, but they use the same password on multiple systems. So once you go, typically if you gain access to one, you will have access to many others as well. And then the good old keylogger. So the keylogger is a piece of software that can be surreptitiously inserted into your operating environment and basically sits there and logs your keystrokes as you make them. Okay, so it sees what IP address or website you're going to. So if you're going to www.combank.com.au/internet banking, it will see that, pick it up, and then you go username, password, bang, it's got that information. Now, I know it's not as simple as that with authentication tokens, all that sort of thing. It's a crude, rudimentary example, but nevertheless an example. Although some people still take the simplified approach to their internet banking. But of course, there are many other systems that it will gain access to simply by logging these keystrokes to a file and then sending it off to the perpetrator, whether it's a website somewhere, whether they retrieve it via FTP, whatever, or email in the background, whatever the case may be. So there are 3 different types of password attacks. And I'm sure you can come up with a bucket load of others. Rainbow tables is usually the one that comes out the most. And of course, the best defense against these is a good password policy, which I think is on the next slide. So there's no real solution to password attacks, not really, because there's too many different vectors, there's too many different ways in. Could be as simple as a valid password attack is, maybe looking at someone's password that's written on a post-it note that's stuck to their screen. It could be just shoulder surfing and seeing what they're doing as they're typing it in. There's too many different ways. It's not just a technology weakness or a configuration weakness. It's a weakness against humans as well, because we tend to have these ideas that we need passwords that we don't forget. Nice and simple, but they've got to be secure. How can I make it secure while keeping it simple? Lots of different ways we can do that, but it becomes a real minefield. So there's no real solution to password attacks. You're never going to stop them completely, but the good thing about it is, as we spoke about before, risk of detection versus reward of getting in for the attacker. Okay, the attacker needs time, the attacker needs resources, the attacker needs not to be detected. So the question they need to ask is, can I get the password I need to gain access to the systems I want to gain access to in a time that suits me as the attacker and without being detected? And if they answer no to any of those, then they're probably not going to do it. So your job is to try to make it difficult for them to say yes to all of those questions. So the best protection is a robust password policy. Okay, so not just a policy in terms of theory and document, but also in terms of implementation. So what does that mean? It means length of password. So as I said before, the longer the password, the more difficult it is to crack. Complexity of the password. So enabling password complexity. So instead of allowing people to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or password or their first name or their mother's maiden name or their wife's birthday, we make it so that they have to put in uppercase, lowercase, other printable characters and potentially non-printable characters depending on the system that you use. Also enforcing something like password rotation. So you can have password for X amount of days. So let's say 30 days. And then after that 30 days, you have to set it to something different. Then in conjunction with that though, be careful, because users are really tricky, because they'll go, change my password at the rotation date. Okay, I've changed it. Now I'll change it again immediately back to the one I had before. So you've got to have a recent password list. Okay, don't allow them to use a recent password. So you might have that set to say a value of 10. So they have to go through 10 different passwords before they can get it. The other trick, of course, if you do that, then what will people do? As I always say, no system is foolproof to a sufficiently talented fool. So what people will do then, if you say, all right, you have to have 10 different passwords in a row, what they'll do is they'll reset their password 10 times really quickly and then go back to the original one. So then you have to have a password time that, you have to change after 30 days, but then you can't change it again for another X amount of days. 10 days, 15 days, whatever the case may be, so that they can't quickly cycle through and get back to where they started from, because they will do it. It does happen. It has happened. I've seen it too often. So that's a history, password history. And then rejection, lockout, and re-enable. Now, this is always, once passwords are rejected, how many times do you reject them? Does your user base tend to forget their passwords a lot? And if they do, rejecting them and then locking them out after 3 attempts might not work for you. You might end up having lots of unhappy users jumping up and down. Do you have an automatic re-enable, remove the lockout automatically? Do you do that? Because if you do, save you a lot of headaches, but then brute force attacks can go undetected for some period of time if you re-enable it after a period of time. The good advantage with that, of course, is that even if you do have it re-enable itself automatically, if you have a sufficient timeout, like 5-10 minutes or 15, whatever your timeout is, at least then it's going to slow an attacker down. So if they're doing brute force attempts and they reject 5 times, nope, lock out for 10-15 minutes, they've got to wait another 10-15 minutes before they can try another 5. So again, that's then starting to impact on their ability to say, am I going to get access to the system undetected and in the time I need? Because the longer they're trying to attack a system, the more likely it is that they will be detected, assuming the security is at least half sufficient. So that's the basics of a password policy. But again, really, really difficult to completely rule out password attacks, protect yourself against password attacks. Really, really difficult. So application attacks. So this is what I was talking about earlier. So application attacks, one of the best resources floating around the place is this one here. Okay, which I refer to in the slide. I'll just jump back to the PowerPoint for a second. So this one is from 2013. I think they don't update it very often. It's about it might be every 2 years. So this might be 2015. No, it says 2013. So these particular application-based attacks, so injection was in 2013, data collected in the 2 years before that showed that injection at that time was the most prevalent application-based attack. Broken authentication session management, second, cross-site scripting, third, so on and so forth. Okay, what you'll generally find, because you can look at all these reports historically, all the previous ones as well as the current new ones, at this particular website. So this one here. And you actually have access to this top 10 project for this year. So that's this document here. That's actually up on the web portal for you to have a look at. So you can see, you can go back to 2010 to 2013 and the current 2017. And it is interesting to see, because you'll see the difference, the differences. Some of the attacks move up and down in terms of popularity. Some of them are fixed and then suddenly come out in a different way at a different time. So if we just download the report, which shouldn't take too long as I did before. So this is a report here. So you can see again, for 2017, injection is still the top attack. Broken authentication second. Sensitive data exposure this time is the third highest attack. And you'll see cross-site scripting is now dropped down to 7th. Okay, so these attacks will bounce up and down as different fixes come out, different products come out, different iterations or versions of products come out of applications. I mean, typically we're talking about, when we're talking about applications in this sense, we're talking about, not talking about individual browsers, but we're talking about things like SQL servers or any sort of database systems, financial management system, any sort of system, whether it's bespoke or not, that uses some form of authentication to allow access to information as a general rule. And these attacks, so I'll let you rotate your way through this particular PDF document, but you'll see, there we go, that's the table I was looking for. So you see, and this was one of the things I was just talking about there. So if we look at this one, let me just get, oh no, I can't do it here. So bear in mind, I haven't got my pointer here because it's not part of the presentation, but you'll have to just bear with me with the cursor here. So injection, in 2013, injection was top dog. It still is top dog. Broken authentication and session management was top dog, was second. It's still second. Cross-site scripting has now dropped down to 7th. Okay. And then we've got some interesting ones here. Missed function level access control and insecure direct object references have merged together to become broken access control. And then we've got a new one here, some new guys here. Those new ones are because things change. Okay, and as things change, as features are added, other types of vulnerabilities are found and then subsequently exploited. And that's the way it goes. That's the way it works. And you'll see when it comes out again in another 4 years in 2021, they'll, potentially injection could be at the top again, but there will be others there as well. Other new ones in there, other ones that are being potentially combined, others that may have dropped off the face of the earth simply because those vulnerabilities have been closed, those holes have been closed and they no longer exist.
Got a couple of questions just from that table, Matt. What about targeted attacks like Medjack? Where would they sort of rank?
Well, they're outside the top 10.
Yeah.
I couldn't say where exactly. I mean, this particular document only talks about the top 10 categories. So potentially, they do have somewhere. They do have a link to basically give you access to the entire database of information they get back. Now, the other thing to keep in mind with this particular database as well, this particular report, is that it all depends on, they send out these surveys to every man and his dog, basically, all over the place. However, it all depends on who responds. Okay, so some of these particular attack categories, whoops, I've gone too far. Sorry, I've lost my spot. Let me go back. That's where I was. So again, as I was talking about before, we need to look at these particular documents with a critical eye. So there may be things on here that we think, there's a certain attack that I know about that's, I see quite a lot, but it's not in this top 10. And it may just be that whoever has responded to their surveys haven't experienced those attacks for whatever reason. So again, it's something that we need to look at with a critical eye. So I guess what you'd say is that as of 2017, these are the top 10 attacks that have been perpetuated against the people who have responded to the survey. I think you have to look at it that way. So is it definitive? Absolutely not. Does it provide you a good reference and guide? Absolutely. So there may be attacks that you're aware of that are not on this. That doesn't mean they're not also popular. It just means that they're not necessarily in the top 10. Does that make sense, Guy?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and we've got a couple more questions about that. Just sort of wondering what kind of attack they would be using if people are trying to steal cryptocurrency. That's a question from Sanjeev.
Well, it could be any of who knows? I mean, there are specific attacks against cryptocurrency, but there's a lot of them in the news at the moment. But what context are we talking about? And this is the thing, and this is the frustrating thing about security, and we'll see it even more next week when we talk about design, is that the answer to a lot of these different questions is, it depends. It depends on the context. It depends on the setting that you're putting that question within, the setting in which you're asking that question. So there is a potential that sensitive data exposure, okay, cryptocurrency, There could be it could be something around server misconfiguration that's allowing a cryptocurrency. There could be using components with known vulnerabilities. Okay, cryptocurrency. It depends. What type of cryptocurrency you're using?
Mm.
Okay, so there's no real definitive answer to across any of these attacks, whether it's application attacks, technology attacks, or attacks against people, so social engineering. There's too many vectors, there's too many ways in, there's too many complexities to be able to give it a definitive answer, other than to say, if you've got a database system or a web-based portal, there will be known vulnerabilities, known attacks against certain versions of software that are at certain patch levels. Because they've been proved, we can see that. So it's a fascinating question, but not one that I think you can provide a definitive answer to without a specific context built around it.
Yeah, right. We'll keep going, and then we'll maybe have a long Q&A session at the end.
Okay. All right, so this is probably a little bit dark, but it was a good slide at the time. So what this is really showing, the thing we want to get out of this is where these attacks occur. Okay, in which applications or which systems they occur. 76% of attacks in the top 10 occur against government organisations. 70% against retail. So that means that of that top 10, government organisations have seen 76% of them. Okay, if that makes sense. Retail and hospitality see 70%. Healthcare, 69%. Financial services, 58%. So that indicates to me that there's other attacks that haven't hit the top 10 that are also directed at financial services. Manufacturing, technology, all really, really high percentages, other than the financial services, which is a little lower, I guess, but still pretty high. So you can see that this doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that the government is attacked more than financial services. Government systems are attacked more than financial services systems. All it means, and this is again, critical interpretation of the data, all it means is that of those top 10 attacks currently talked about, government organisations will be attacked by 76% of those attacks at some stage. Financial services, only 58. So as I said, what I would get out of that, even just as preliminary data without going into it with any depth or any real thought, is that there are other attacks perpetuated against financial services organisations that don't fit neatly into those top 10. And that's why I was harking back to what I said a couple of slides ago, or to answer one of the questions, is that there are definitely attacks that some of you may have seen, depending on the context in which you work, that are not on that top 10. Okay, but you see a lot of, or you had a lot of experience with. So it's a guide. Okay, definitely not definitive. It's a guide. And I think that's really important to understand for any survey, any summarization of data that you may see, particularly with who's that favorite one of mine? I'll get it. I'll think of him in a minute. I can't think of the organisation at the moment. It's slipped my mind for a minute, but I'll think of it in a minute. There's a particular organisation that do reports, technology reports, and they talk about their magic quadrants, and that might ring a bell with someone. So let me know if you can think of Gartner. Our good friends at Gartner, that talk about all their lovely reports and their magic quadrants and what things are trending and what things aren't trending. You really need to look at those critically. They're not authoritative, not in my opinion anyway. I think they're a good guide, but every man and his dog talk about them in marketing material about Gartner, does this, and Gartner said that, and Gartner did this, and they got these magic quadrants. But I think it's really important as a security professional, in particular, to look at everything you see really, really critically. So don't just accept it. Think about how it pertains to your particular organization and the security implementation you've got, and what you see in your baseline, in your day-to-day operation, in the attacks that you see when they come up to when they are impacted on your organization, and treat it all with a grain of salt. And sometimes you might say, yeah, okay, that's perfect. That fits exactly with what I see. But more often than not, you won't, and you need to dig a little bit deeper to find out what the actual story is. So it's an interesting point, and I think that's the main thing I want you to get out of some of these slides, is that they're good to look at and they give you a guide, but don't consider them as literal dogma. And then the last sort of category I wanted to briefly have a look at, which is probably my favorite, in that it involves humans and involves manipulation of psychology and preys on our tendency to trust others. And I'm not saying I like to do that, but it's just I have a qualification in psychology, and it's an interesting area of security, I think, and one that is quite often not really thought about in anywhere near as much depth as when we talk about secure design processes and technical controls and all these other, whiz-bang things that we like to do in terms of software and hardware and all the bells and whistles and toys that we like to buy. Whereas social engineering can be a perfectly great weapon to use to get inside information within an organisation. And I think next slide or so we'll actually talk about, I'll bring that in more to it. So the basic idea of social engineering is it's just a clever manipulation of our tendency as humans to want to trust other people. And when other people are nice to us, we like to be nice in return in general. So if they give us a compliment or tell us we're clever or think that the system we're using is fantastic, and they butter us up, so to speak, and then they ask later on down the track, oh, could I have access to that as well? And then we think, oh, well, they were nice to us, we'll be nice to them. And it may not work with everyone, but it works a lot more than what you sort of think. So some different human attacks we talk about. So shoulder surfing, okay? So just watching over someone's shoulder while they're accessing something. Really easy one. Tailgating is basically following someone who's authorized into a building when you're not authorized. So, build up a conversation with someone outside the building having a cigarette or coming back in from getting a coffee, build up a bit of a rapport, in you go tailgate with them on some false premise. So we have our phishing, which we all know about. We've all got those emails time and time and time and time and time again. Whaling. So whaling is different from phishing. It's similar to phishing, but it's different in that whaling goes after bigger, more specific targets. So we're talking about CEOs, or people in specific roles that have a great deal of access to a system or a great deal of power. Whaling goes after them because if they get access to the top, it makes the attacker's job a lot easier to get in. Okay, we have a variant of phishing called vishing, which is using voice. So that's basically social engineering over the phone, more or less. And then we have the more prevalent now, becoming more common and really, really annoying, is smishing, which is the use of mobile devices or apps or SMS to trick people into giving you information or access to something or money using mobile phones. And I'm sure you would have got them, because I've got about 4 or 5 in the last week where I've had SMS from different people saying, you've got a free ticket here, or a round the world cruise, or, this is your invoice, please make sure you pay it, otherwise we'll call debt collection, all this sort of stuff, which is all rubbish, but it can work with certain people. Good old blackmail, been around forever. So that's basically telling someone that, okay, if you don't do X, Y, Z, I'm going to do some harm to you. Okay, so you frighten people. It's a form of social engineering. Data mining sort of links back into whaling in some sort of respect, in that we're basically looking at systems or some repository of information, trying to find out as much data as we can about a specific target. Okay, so typically we talk about database systems, employee databases and those sort of things when we talk about data mining, but it can be any repository of information. Simple as that. Okay, so that's it for this evening and finished right on time in terms of our content, which is really good. So next week, we're going to talk about secure design practices. So defense in depth, a little bit more about that fluids perimeter that we've been talking about, a little bit on system security and network security as it pertains specifically to mechanisms and specific technologies, and then look at some best practice design principles, which hopefully shall round out that entire week. So that's next week. At the moment, let's go through some of the questions. So is there any in particular you want me to answer specifically, Guy, or do you just want to go through them one-on-one?
Yeah, there's not too many tonight, which is, I suppose, a nice thing in one
15,
respect.
yep.
But just a couple on that slide with the apps submitted to the OWASPs, was it? Aaron was asking, would government be the biggest target in general for people to be aiming for? And Craig was asking, does that mean that the financial services perhaps have better security policies than government organisations?
They're great questions, which I have absolutely no data to support, other than to say governments are potentially a huge target. But you've got to look at again, you've got to put it into the context of what sort of attacker you're talking about. So government organisations, we often hear stories, and there's probably a hell of a lot more that we don't hear about espionage type practices against government organisations. We don't often hear about simple attacks against government organisations so much, notwithstanding the F-35, the one that we had the other week. And I wouldn't necessarily say that financial services have better policies than government organisations. And again, I think you really got to look at a couple of different things here. One is that obviously financial services protect things of fiscal value, okay? And we know, unfortunately, in this world of ours, that anything with a fiscal value, so bonds or physical money or shares or cryptocurrency, are all put up on this massive pedestal and seen as the ultimate thing that we have to protect. And I guess from that point of view, financial services, you might argue that they take a more active approach to protecting their assets than do some government organisations. But then if you flip it over and you say, all right, what about the NSA or the CIA or the FBI? Okay, their information is obviously hugely important, not necessarily from a monetary point of view, but for criminal investigations, for national security, all sorts of different reasons. So again, I think you've got to ask that question, which area of government or which area of financial services are you looking at? And what is your prime motive? What is it that you are trying to get access to? And obviously the more value it has in our society or within our structure of that particular organisation within that context, then the more highly it's going to be protected.
Question from Deepanch. Which Australian laws deal with cybersecurity? Is there a major act in particular that you're aware of that?
I can't remember the direct name of the act off the top of my head, but yes, there are specific acts that deal with cybersecurity, absolutely. And that's a really good question. I'll make a note of that, and I will provide you with some links to those because it's an interesting topic point.
And just anecdotally, is there other protections strong enough? Are they falling behind? Will they always be behind? Is that just the nature of
I think that is. I think that is that's the nature of security, is that security by and large is very much a reactive art. Yes, we have protections against many different attacks, lots of different attacks and lots of different types of attacks. And we now have security systems that are more intelligent in being able to interpret and understand what's going on and put in proactive control or reactive controls and sometimes proactive controls, rather than waiting for a specific attack. So using heuristics, okay, using a general understanding of what should be normal to then be able to protect against that. But in terms of, we know legislation, if the question specifically about legislation and acts, then we know legislation certainly does, take a long time to develop. And if you look at security as being a very reactive area of endeavour anyway, then you've got, you add upon that the extra layers of the slow-moving cycle of government to put laws into effect. Yes, they're behind. Yes, they probably always will be behind. One of the things I think that will become big in the future is this whole idea of artificial intelligence. What it's capable of, what we allow it to be capable of, and then how we legislate for it. Going to be very, very big in the future, I think. And there's a few futurists which are certainly saying the same thing. So again, yes, I'd say, in my opinion, they are behind, and they will always be behind.
Okay.
Now, I see a couple of people have just popped up about Crimes Act and Anti-Spam Act and those sorts of things. Yes, there's certainly, and there's cyber security components within most specific criminal acts and codes of conduct throughout each state, but there are also some specific cybersecurity acts that I'll provide you with information to. So I'm not going to put up all the different acts around Australia, because there's lots of them and you'll get bored reading them, and they might not apply to many of you, but I'll certainly give you some examples of some specific cybersecurity ones.
We've got a couple of questions on passwords. Carl's asking about password rotation and saying that he thought that was generally considered a bad thing these days. I wonder whether the orthodox or literature sort of goes in cycles, whether things change around that. And also, Chris has asked about password managers, things like LastPass or Keeper.
Yep. Things always change with security. So again, my answer to that is it's going to depend on your organisation. Certainly password rotations with a short time frame is a bad thing. And that's what I was trying to get at before, is that if you just leave it rotation for a short period of time, then you're going to get back to the start pretty quickly again. But again, it's going to depend on your organisation. Will it work in your organisation? Some organisations cannot implement password rotation because the users simply won't tolerate it, can't work with it, won't do it, find any way they can to get around it, and creates more problems what it's worth. So password policies, rotation is part of it, could be part of it, depending on your organisation, or you may just see fit to say, well, you know what, we're not going to rotate our passwords, but it needs to be 35 characters long, and it needs to be complex, and it needs to be blah, 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 blah. So it's certainly a tool in your armory for password policies, but not one that you have to use specifically. And what was the other question on the password, sir?
About password managers, do you have any thoughts on that?
Password managers. I've worked at plenty of places that use password managers, and yeah, they're fine as long as you can manage the password to the password manager. I mean, all it really does is probably abstracts it one level further out. But yeah, I've got no inherent problems with password managers. There's lots of them out there that do a very, very, very good job. But at the end of the day, there has to be some way to access them, which is generally via a password, and the security of the password manager is limited by the relative strength and usefulness of that particular password.
Okay, now we've got more questions coming in, of course. Some anecdotal suggestions that LastPass is pretty good.
Yeah, LastPass, KeyPass is another one that's pretty good too.
And just while we're on the anecdotal data from the chat earlier, we had a lot of examples of insiders being the people responsible for attacks from our attendees. In terms of questions, maybe comments, Mark Layton's written in that APRA last week released a proposed prudential standard for discussion. aimed at the financial services industry, specific for cybersecurity. So maybe it looks like we're trying to catch up.
Yep. Yep.
So that's.
There's been some good things come out of financial services very recently over the last few years, and again, that's because that whole protection of those fiscal assets is seen as being the sort of I guess the Pandora's box. Everyone wants to protect those before anything else. But I think those sorts of things will certainly start to be applied to other types of information, particularly around personal information, medical records, that sort of thing, as we go further into the future.
Interesting question here about how would you rate awareness campaigns versus technical upgrade? Is there advice on what a good approach would be? I suppose, it's again maybe, but
awareness campaign versus technical upgrade.
Yeah, I suppose whether it's taking it out of people's hands or empowering people.
Oh, okay. I get what you're driving at with that. I think you need both. I think you always need to have some level, your end users, I mean, as security professionals, we already have that awareness, but I think your end users always have to have some sort of awareness. I don't think there's any technical upgrade, unless you get to the stage where you've got like A1 classification systems, which are basically disconnected from the rest of the world and just sit away and do their own thing. I don't think there's ever a case where if you've got someone accessing a system, that their awareness about the security loopholes or security vulnerabilities in that system shouldn't be something that you'd raise. So I think the technical upgrades, absolutely, as you can afford them, as they fix particular problems that are applicable to your organization, then technical upgrades are a must, and that will always be the case. But I don't think that removes the need for security awareness at some level. So I think both.
Yeah, makes sense. Christian has a question about the app slide, the different sectors. When they talked about the percentage of apps that failed testing in each sector, what sort of apps were they talking about exactly? What are they sending in?
I don't have any specific data about that, but the generalised data is that it's any sort of application that business applications. So some of them were database systems. There were also talking about bespoke applications or applications that have been written in-house. It's just as a range of applications. So it's nothing specific. Like you can't put your finger on it and say, well, it's all SQL servers are blah 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 blah. It's again, it's related to the context of the particular area, the particular organisation or the particular area of industry.
Sure. Okay. Hope that answers your question as well, Hamilton. Craig's asked about, with regard to human attacks, where pretexting fits in. If you're familiar with pretexting.
No, not really.
Craig, if you want to send a elaboration.
Not sure you're driving it there. I think I might know what he's saying. I'll let him come through.
No worries. Got a question from BC. What about hardware 2FA like YubiKey and YubiKey?
Good. Yeah. Good. Absolutely. So there's a lot of those dongle-based approaches which are becoming more popular, and they work well. But again, there's also that relationship of keeping that particular technology secure as well. So having access to it, in other words. So if plenty of systems where you need some sort of hardware device plugged into it for it to be able to work. And those sort of systems are very secure, and they do work really well from a security viewpoint. But again, there's always those little things that can break down, like, you lose the device or it gets stolen, it breaks down. Then there's other issues around that as well. So useful systems, absolutely, but certainly ways they can be broken down as well.
Okay, got Andy.
So Craig's saying, defined as the practice of presenting oneself as someone else in order to obtain private information.
Mm.
So where does it fit in? It's social engineering. So that you could say that it fits into phishing, whaling, smishing, vishing, all of those sorts of. I mean, it's basically a it's a precursor to all that. I mean, you need to be able to convince them that you're, well, I mean, I guess you could say you're just someone off the street and you're just looking for certain information, but yeah, it can fit into any of those sorts of social engineering attacks as well, to try to convince them that you're someone you're not.
Okay,
Uh,
maybe.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just thinking maybe a few more questions. Finish up maybe quarter two or 10 to. Andrew's asked a couple of times, what's your feeling about physical security? He always feels that the easiest way to break into a network is through the window of a small branch office. I think we touched on that a little bit
We
last
did.
week and
We
again
did.
this
We
week.
touched on that last week. Physical security is vitally important, and it's really good thought. It's one of those, physical security is often one of those things that tends to get lost when we talk about all this sort of digital security. People get quite excited about all of the digital things that we use and the toys that we use, but Andrew's 100% correct. At the end of the day, if you can see through a window at the front of an office and you can see the lights flashing and you know where their server and their switches and all their devices are, well placed brick through that window can lead to damage to devices, theft of the devices, whatever the case may be. So physical security is absolutely important. And not just in terms of having locks and having thick glass windows and maybe one-way windows and closed circuit TVs and all that sort of stuff, but also in terms of thinking about where you place your equipment, where you place your data systems, so that they're not in public view, they're not in public thoroughfares, they're not somewhere where the cleaner can disconnect the power cord to power up the vacuum cleaner, all those sorts of things as well. So very physical. It's absolutely vital. It's absolutely vital.
Craig and Staney are both wondering about or just asking for general thoughts about browsers remembering your history and keeping cookies, and the balance between user friendliness of cookies versus private browsing.
Yeah, and again, that talks that's right along the security continuum, isn't it? So the security continuum, you've got your paranoid at one end where you don't keep anything for any longer than a millisecond, and then at the other end you've got your I don't care where you keep everything forever. Again, I think it depends on access to the system, how many people get it. Like on my private machine here at home that I'm working on at the moment, I don't tend to worry about it too much. I know what I look at. I know what's going. Well, I hope I know. I should say that. I hope I know what's going on. But it's one person system. No one else ever accesses it. So I think in that case, it's probably okay to be a little more relaxed in terms of that security continuum. But certainly on shared systems or systems with multiple profiles on them, then the security that needs to back off. And also in situations where you've got systems that make extensive use of that sort of recorded information for whatever reason, then there needs to be some serious thought about how much information you keep, and more importantly, really, the time which you keep that information for. Because regardless of what information is, it in general has a finite lifetime, where its value is X amount for a certain amount of time, and then after that time's expired, it gradually gets less and less valuable to both the people that own it, but also to the people who could potentially want it from an attack perspective.
Hamilton's asking about open source as a way of providing more security. So surely it's more open as there are more eyes checking for holes.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean that's a general idea. That's a general line of thought, is that you got lots and lots of people looking at the code at the same time, and that's, I mean, it happened plenty of times in the past, particularly around SSL loopholes in the last 5 to 6 years, where people have found holes in SSL and they've patched them up because it's open source, whereas obviously proprietary software is a slower turning beast, a slower developing beast, and takes a long time sometimes to get around those particular security holes. So I think open source is great. I think it's a wonderful, there's lots of great tools and lots of great packages that have come up from open source that are really, really secure because you have a huge knowledge base, if you like, of people working on it. So, whereas, I mean, if you look at Microsoft Windows, for example, still relatively secure, I guess. But with every iteration, rush to market, which we talked a bit about last week, getting things to market quickly, all the effort and time put into it is, with the same teams working on it all the time, is going to lead to specific patterns of programming, specific patterns of development, which can then lead to certain types of issues. Whereas in open source, huge knowledge base, lots of different people looking at it from different angles, you could argue that in a lot of ways it's more secure, I guess. Yeah.
Mm.
You could argue that. Yep, sure.
Cool. I suppose it's just a question of how much you want to retain the rights to it and
Yep.
profitability. Is that?
Yeah, exactly right. That's what it comes down to.
Okay. All right. Well, there's heaps of good questions still coming in, but I reckon we'll have to stop at some point. So perhaps if you want to maybe shift across to the forums, folks, if you want to keep talking. The chat's been going gangbusters all webinar anyway, so I'm sure there's lots going on and people still wanting to chat there. We'll be back next week. What are we going to be talking about next week, Matt, again?
So we are going to be talking about secure design and those particular components there. So defense in depth, the fluidity of that perimeter as we've been talking about, a little bit about system and network security in terms of the technical parts of it, and then some best practice design principles, which hopefully should round out the entire session.
Beauty. Thanks very much for that. Looking forward to that one. Have a look at the quiz, which is up there already, folks, and the recording will be up if you want to go over it again tomorrow. Thanks very much, Matt, as always.
No worries. Thanks, Guy, and thanks everyone for attending. See you next week.
Oh, and before I forget, thanks, Diane.
Thanks.